Hey everyone, it's Rebecca, and I'm going to show you how I throw my bonsai pots. I'll do a brief explanation of each step so you know what my hands are doing and how they're doing it. The first step is putting the bat on the wheel head. This separates the clay from the wheel head so you can easily remove the piece when it's finished. The bat must be wet before I put the clay on it so the clay stays stuck as I throw with it. After that short step, I slam the clay onto the bat to make sure it has a good grip on it and continue to slab center it. With larger pieces, I like to slab center because it helps me get a head start on centering it as a whole. It also helps me make sure that the clay is secure on the bat and will not fly off as I'm working on it. After a few good slaps, I wet my hands and the clay and begin to center. Centering your clay is when you compress it into a symmetrical shape on the wheel. This step is the most important step because it will dictate how good your piece will come out in the end. The reason for that? Well, if you have an uncentered piece, we call it a wobble, and a wobble means that you won't have the clay equally distributed throughout your entire piece, and it will not be balanced or easy to use. Wobbles can also cause throwing difficulties like in the wall raising, compression, or even adding a shape to your piece. This means you might not be able to achieve a certain shape, or your piece will get tired and fall apart. After centering is raising and plateauing. Basically, I squeeze the clay on both sides to raise it up, and then I push down on top to slowly plateau. I do this a few times to help the clay become compressed and more sturdy as I throw it. And when I say a few times, I mean like 2 or 3, 4 at the max. Doing this too much can wear out the clay faster, and you can lose the amount of clay you're working with due to the slip coming off. After a few raises and plateaus, I begin my last plateau to make the clay really flat so I can poke my piece. Poking is kind of what it sounds like. You poke a hole in the center to begin making the inside of your piece hollow. This step also determines how thick the base of your piece will be. Usually, I make a pretty thick base so I have room to trim and add feet. That means my bases range from ½ inch to 1 inch thick, but your average base should be about 1/4 inch thick and no less. If it ends up being thinner than that, you'll have S-cracks, a broken bottom, or just no bottom at all. I've been throwing for a really long time, so I kind of have muscle memory on when I need to keep going or when I need to stop. It's just something you pick up as you throw more and more. After poking and making sure I have a good thickness, I begin to pull. Pulling determines the diameter of your piece. This means if you want a wide mouth piece, you'll have to pull pretty far. However, the farther you pull, the less clay you'll have to work with when you raise the walls. It's important to remember that you're pulling and not pushing at the same time. If you happen to push down while you pull, your base will become thin and you will run into those issues I mentioned recently. I also can't pull too fast, otherwise the clay might become wobbly and then uncentered, causing more issues. There is a balance between wheel speed and pull speed, but because everyone is different, it's hard to say which one's right. As you can see, it's easier for me to pull when I use a sponge. The clay stays wet and there's less friction, which makes it easier to pull altogether. When I pull to the diameter I want, I make sure to compress the clay on the rim to keep it sturdy. Wall raising is the next step. This determines the height of your piece. I use both of my hands, and on each hand I use one finger to squeeze the wall at the base. Applying an equal amount of pressure on both sides with each finger, the clay moves upwards. I continue this trend by moving both my fingers with the equal amount of pressure up the wall. If you watch carefully, you can see the walls getting taller and taller until I reach the top. I repeat this step about 3 to 4 times to make sure I have the maximum height I need. The amount of time you have to pull up the walls varies. It all depends on how much clay you're using, what type of clay you're using, and the wheel speed. After a few wall pulls, I compress the top. This is done by squeezing each side of the wall and pushing down at the top of the wall. Compression happens frequently in between each step in wheel throwing. Without it, your clay could get thin, weak, and even wobbly. Compression isn't just for walls. I also compress the base too. To do this, I use a wooden rib tool. I use the short edge of this tool to make sure my base is level and compressed. If my piece was larger in diameter, I would use the long edge instead of the short edge. After I finish compression on the inside of my piece, I will start to do the same on the outside by using the walls I just created. I take the long edge of the tool and press it against the wall. My other hand opposes this pressure on the inside of the wall. Due to the straight edge that the rib tool has, this creates a very clean look on the outside of my pottery. Rib tools come in many different shapes, sizes, and even materials. This particular rib tool is made of wood. I have two other rib tools. One is made of rubber, the other is a thin metal rib tool. They are both good for scraping off the excess slip on your piece. Getting rid of excess slip is a good idea so your piece can dry more evenly. Lastly, I take another wooden tool with a pointed tip and use it to trim the bottom of my piece. This will help me create a sharper edge when I cut it off the bat. And that just about does it. That's basically everything I need to do before I complete a pot. Well, there's the trimming, of course, but I think I'll save that for another video. If you enjoyed the content you just watched, please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. See you next time!